It was Christmas on the Northwestern Railway. Stations were bustling with laughter, and children were happily playing. Many engines were busy, working hard to bring families together. The only exception to the engines were the three smaller engines on the branch line sheds. The three engines were Thomas, Percy, and Toby, who were in the sheds all morning as the workmen were busy. They were building an extra shed for Rosa as she now worked on Thomas's branch line. The workmen had to get to lunch break before any of the engines left. Percy groaned about this. "It's so unfair," said Percy. "I wanted to pull the Christmas local today. It would have been so nice to see the Elsbridge church fully decorated for Christmas. If only it wasn't for that Rosa." "Don't worry, Percy," Toby replied. "We'll be all right. We have already told each other our Christmas stories. Now it's Thomas's turn." "Ah, yes," said Thomas. "Christmas stories. Toby, your telling of the Nativity was excellent. I love that. Jesus' birth is the reason we celebrate Christmas today. And Percy, your story about Comet's origins was incredible. It was nice to see that he was bought by Santa instead of having to be chopped up for meat." "Well, what is your Christmas story, Thomas?" asked Toby. "Do you have any ideas?" Christmas stories. Thomas frowned. "I'm sorry, my friends, but it seems no Christmas stories have come to mind." "Oh well," remarked Percy. "If you won't tell any Christmas stories, then it's time we sing carols. Ready, Toby?" "Wait!" Percy and Toby looked as Thomas shouted the word. "How about instead of telling you a Christmas story, I tell you two about the time I first arrived on the Northwestern?" "Not a Christmas story! Not a Christmas story!" "No, I think I like the idea of singing carols better. Ready? Begin! Percy!" "Thomas just offered to tell us about his past. It would be rude to reject him that way." "Okay, Thomas, you were saying?" Thomas smiled and then spoke. "All right. This is the story about the time I arrived on the Northwestern Railway." And this is the story that he told them. Thomas the Tank Engine. Thomas and Gordon. Thomas was a tank engine who lived at a big station. He had 6 small wheels, a short stumpy funnel, a short stumpy boiler, and a short stumpy dome. He was a fussy little engine, always pulling coaches about. He pulled them to the station ready for the big engines to take out on long journeys. And when trains came in and the people had got out, he would pull the empty coaches away so that the big engines could go and rest. He was a cheeky little engine too. He thought that no engine worked as hard as he did. So he played tricks on them. He liked best of all to come quietly beside them when they were dozing on sidings. And when he did, he made them jump. "Wake up, lazy bones," he would whistle. "Why don't you work hard like me?" Then he would laugh rudely and run away to find more coaches. One day, Gordon was resting on a siding. He was tired. The big express he always pulled had been late, and he had to run as fast as he could to make up for lost time. He was just about to go to sleep when Thomas came up. "Wake up, lazy bones," he whistled. "Do some hard work for a change. You can't catch me!" And he ran off laughing. Instead of going to sleep again, Gordon thought about how he could pay Thomas out. One morning, Thomas wouldn't wake up. His driver and his fireman couldn't make him start. His fire went out, and there was not enough steam. It was nearly time for the express. The people were waiting, but the coaches weren't ready. At last, Thomas started. Oh dear, he yawned. "Come on," said the coaches. "Hurry up!" Thomas gave them a rude bump and started for the station. Don't stop dawdling, he grumbled. Thomas fussed into the station where Gordon was waiting. Hurry up, you, said Gordon crossly. Hurry up yourself, said Thomas cheekily. Yes, said Gordon, I will. And almost before the coaches had stopped moving, Gordon came out of his siding and was coupled up to the train. Get in quickly, please, Gordon whistled. So the people got in. The signal went down and the clock struck the hour. The guard waved his green flag and Gordon was ready to start. Thomas usually pushed behind the big engines to help them start, but he was always uncoupled first, so that when the train was running nicely, he could stop and go back. This time, he was late, and Gordon started so quickly that they forgot to uncouple Thomas. Come on, puffed Gordon to the coaches. Pull harder, puffed Thomas to Gordon. The heavy train slowly began to move out of the station. The train went faster and faster, too fast for Thomas. He wanted to stop, but he couldn't. Stop, he whistled. Hurry, laughed Gordon. You can't get away, laughed the coaches. Poor Thomas was going faster than he had ever gone before. He was out of breath, and his wheels hurt him, but he had to go on. I shall never be the same again, he thought sadly. My wheels will be quite worn out. At last, they stopped at the station. Everyone laughed to see Thomas puffing and panting behind. They uncoupled him, put him on a turntable, and then put him on a siding out of the way. Well, little Thomas, chuckled Gordon as he passed. Now you know what hard work means, don't you? Poor Thomas couldn't answer. He had no breath. He just puffed slowly away to rest and had a long drink. Thomas's train. One night, Thomas and Henry were alone. Henry was ill. The men worked hard, but he did not get any better. Henry usually pulled the first train in the morning, and Thomas had to get his coaches ready. If Henry is ill, he thought, perhaps I will be able to pull his train. Thomas wanted to pull passenger trains, but he wasn't allowed. Today, Thomas felt that he had a chance. Thomas ran to find the coaches. Come along, he said. There's plenty of time, grumbled the coaches. He took them to the platform and wanted to run round in front at once, but his driver wouldn't let him. So Thomas waited and waited. The people got in. The guard and station master walked up and down, and the porters banged to the doors. And still Henry didn't come. Thomas got more and more excited every minute. The fat director came out of his office to see what was the matter, and the guard and the station master told him about Henry. Find another engine, he ordered. There's only Thomas, they said. You'll have to do it then, Thomas. Be quick now. So Thomas ran round the front to back down on the coaches ready to start. Don't be impatient, said his driver. Wait till everything is ready. But Thomas was too excited to listen to a word he said. What happened then, no one knows. Perhaps they forgot to couple Thomas to the train. Perhaps Thomas was too impatient to wait till they were ready. Or perhaps his driver pulled the lever by mistake. Anyhow, Thomas started. People shouted and waved, but he didn't stop. They're waving at me because I'm a splendid engine, he thought importantly. Henry says it's hard to pull trains, but I think it's easy. Hurry, he puffed, pretending to be like Gordon. As he passed the first signal box, he saw the men leaning out and waving and shouting. They're pleased to see me, he thought. They've never seen me pulling a train before. It's nice of them to wave. And he whistled, Thank you, as he hurried on. But soon, he came to a signal which said danger. Bother, he thought. I was running so nicely too. Oh, what nuisance signals are. And he blew his whistle angrily. One of the signalmen ran up. "Hello, Thomas," he said. "What are you doing here?" "I'm pulling a train," he said proudly. "Can't you see?" "Where are your coaches then?" Thomas looked back. "Why, bless me," he said, "if we haven't left them behind." "Yes," said the signalman. "You better go back quickly and fetch them." Poor Thomas was so sad he nearly cried. "Cheer up," said his driver. "Let's go back quickly and try again." At the station, the passengers were telling the fat director, the station master, and the guard what a bad railway it was. But when they saw how sad Thomas was when he came back, they couldn't be cross. So, they coupled him up to the train, and this time he really pulled it. But for a long time, the other engines laughed at Thomas and said, "Look, there's Thomas, who wanted to pull a train, but forgot about the coaches." Thomas and the trucks. Thomas grumbled in the sheds that night. "I'm tired of pushing coaches. I want to see the world." The others didn't take much notice, for Thomas was a little engine with a long tongue. But one night, Edward came to the shed. He was a kind little engine, and he felt sorry for Thomas. "I've got some trucks to take home tomorrow," he told him. "If you take them instead, I'll push coaches in the yard." "Thank you," said Thomas. "That will be nice." So they asked their drivers the next morning, and when they said yes, Thomas ran happily to find the trucks. Trucks are silly and noisy. They talk a lot and don't attend to what they are doing. They don't listen to their engine, and when he stops, they bump into each other, screaming. And I'm sorry to say, they play tricks on an engine who is not used to them. Edward knew all about trucks. He warned Thomas to be careful, but Thomas was far too excited to listen. The shunter fastened the coupling, and when the signal dropped, Thomas was ready. Guard blew his whistle, and Thomas started off. But the trucks weren't ready. "Wait, Thomas," they said. "Wait!" But Thomas wouldn't wait. Come on," he puffed, and the trucks grumbled slowly out of the siding onto the main line. Thomas was happy. Come along," he puffed. "All right, don't fuss. All right, don't fuss," grumbled the trucks. They clattered through the stations and rumbled over the bridges. Thomas whistled as they rushed through the tunnel in which Henry had been shafted. Then they came to the top of the hill where Gordon had been stuck. "Steady now, steady," warned the driver, and he shut off steam and began to put on the brakes. We're stopping, called Thomas. No, answered the trucks, and they bumped into each other. Go on, and before his driver could stop them, they had pushed Thomas down the hill, and were rattling and laughing behind him. Poor Thomas tried hard to stop them. Stop pushing, he hissed, but the trucks would not stop. Go on, they giggled in their silly way. He was glad when they got to the bottom. Then he saw in front the place where they had to stop. Oh dear, what shall I do? They rattled through the station, and luckily the line was clear as they swerved into the goods yard. I must stop! And he shut his eyes tight. When he opened them, he had stopped just in front of the buffers, and there, watching him, was the fat director. What are you doing here, Thomas? He asked sternly. I've brought Edward's trucks, Thomas answered. They pushed me so fast. Haven't you pulled trucks before? No. Then you've got a lot to learn about trucks, little Thomas. They are silly things and must be kept in their place. After pushing them around for a few weeks, you'll know almost as much about them as Edward does. Then you'll be a really useful engine. Thomas and the Breakdown Train. Every day, the fat director came to the station to catch his train, and he always said to Thomas, "Hello, you have a lot of trucks in the yard today. Work hard now. Be good." And Thomas did. He knew now that he wasn't so clever as he had thought. Besides, the fat director had been kind to him and he wanted to learn all about trucks so that he could be a really useful engine. But on a siding, there were some trucks that Thomas was told he couldn't touch. Along with it, there was a small coach, some flat trucks, and two queer things his driver called cranes. "That's the breakdown train," he said. "When there's an accident, the workmen get into the coach and the engine takes them quickly to help the hurt people and to clear and mend the line. The cranes are for lifting heavy things like engines, coaches, and trucks." One day, Thomas was in the yard when he heard an engine whistling, "Help! Help!" And the goods train came rushing through much too fast. It was a new engine, whose name was James, and he was frightened. His brake blocks were on fire, and smoke and sparks streamed out on each side. "They're pushing me! They're pushing me!" he panted. Poor James disappeared under a bridge. "I'd like to teach those trucks a lesson," said Thomas the Tank Engine. Presently, a bell rang in a signal box, and a man came running. "James is off the line! The breakdown train! Quickly!" he shouted. So Thomas was coupled on. The workmen jumped into their coach, and off they went. Thomas worked the hardest. "Hurry!" he puffed, and this time he wasn't pretending to be like Gordon. He really meant it. "Bother those trucks and their tricks," he thought. "I hope poor James isn't hurt." They found James and the trucks at the bend in the line. The brake van and the last few trucks were on the rails, but the front ones were piled in a heap. Thomas pushed the breakdown train alongside the unhurt trucks. Then he pulled those trucks out of the way. Oh dear, they groaned. Serves you right, puffed Thomas crossly. When the men put other trucks on the line, he pulled them away too. He was hard at work, puffing backwards and forwards all afternoon. "This will teach you a lesson, he told the trucks. And they answered, yes it will, in a sad, groany, and creaky sort of voice. They left the broken trucks and mended the line. Then, with two cranes, they put James back on the rails. He tried to move, but he couldn't, so Thomas helped him back to the shed. James informed Thomas that he had wooden brakes, and that was the reason he was not able to stop on time. Thomas listened to this, and decided to ask the fat director about it. Speaking of who, was waiting anxiously for them. "Well, Thomas," he said, "I've heard all about it, and I'm very pleased with you. You're a really useful engine." Thomas told the fat director about the wooden brakes. Listening intently, he decided to make this response. "James shall have some proper brakes and a new coat of paint, and you shall have a branch line all to yourself." "Oh, sir," said Thomas happily. Now Thomas is as happy as can be. He has a branch line all to himself and puffs proudly backwards and forwards with two coaches all day. He is never lonely, because there is always some engine to talk to at the junction. Edward and Henry stop quite often and tell him the news. Gordon is always in a hurry and does not stop, but he never forgets to whistle to little Thomas, and Thomas always whistles in return. "So that's it," remarked Percy. "You got a branch line and two coaches because you re-railed James." "Yes, replied Thomas. I did. That's the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. Any engine could have gotten that breakdown crane and derailed James. It only happened to be you. I just did what needed to be done. I had no idea I would get all this. Well then, Miss Gracie should make Santa Claus the next controller of the Northwestern Railway, because he is doing something nice, something that needs to get done. If you say so, Percy, but remember, a good deed could take you very far. Maybe you should try to do some good as well. And then, who knows? You may get something you really enjoy. Percy was fuming. I've had enough of this, he complained. I just want to deliver the Christmas local and see the decorated church. I really wish the workmen lunch break, a workman called out, and they all went away. Percy was pleased. Yay, he cheered. Now I may deliver the local. See you tonight, friends. Thomas and Toby still waited for their drivers and firemen to come to work. Toby smiled and looked at Thomas. Thank you for the story, he said calmly. While it wasn't the usual holiday lore, it's one that I definitely needed. Well then, said Thomas, I'm glad I was able to give it to you. Merry Christmas, Toby. Merry Christmas, Thomas.